Good morning and good evening, everyone. Welcome to Conversations with Rudy Rivera, another super interesting interview with Bob Wiesner, who is a principal of Change Force, a consulting company for companies and law firms, and who wrote a real outstanding book called Winning is Better. Everyone likes to win. You can get it on Kindle. It's a very practical book. I read it prior to the interview. Gives a lot of great advice, especially to law firms. Bob, welcome to my conversations with Rudy Rivera.
Thank you, Rudy. I'm delighted to be here and glad to see people joining us.
Yes, they are. They are coming in, and we have a Zoom audience and we have a LinkedIn audience too. Uh, Bob, why don't we start by telling, first of all, tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us about your book, why you think it's important. And then we're going to get into some hardcore principles.
Sure. Um, I have been this kind of studying and being involved in and recommending and consulting on revenue growth since the mid 90s. And before that, I'd spent a number of years in advertising. The connection between the advertising career and the revenue growth advisory career is all around the topic of persuasion. How do we persuade people to buy what we want to sell them? And that goes even further in the revenue growth area because unlike trying to sell a bar of soap, in professional services, especially in law firms, these are very important decisions that buyers are making. It's a matter of business survival in some cases in terms of what law firm they might choose to hire. So my expertise has been focused around helping professional services firms understand what's going on in the buyer's mind, how they make decisions, how they really make decisions about selecting providers, and then helping my clients, those firms, take advantage of that. Well, first learn that information and then take advantage of it so that they can win more often. So that's where I come from professionally. The book, which thank you for mentioning it. Here it is right here. Winning is Better. Is It's a story because people like stories better than they like just facts and statistics. But it's a story about how a professional services firm developed an opportunity, pursued that opportunity, pitched that opportunity, and then won that opportunity. And along the way, what I'm sharing with my readers are those key decision moments that they made in order to be effective, to differentiate themselves from competition and to ultimately win the business. And of course, in doing so, we'll pass along a lot of models, a lot of strategies, a lot of tactics that any law firm or any professional services firm can use to improve their own win rate when they're faced with a big opportunity and a competitive market.
Well, it's interesting that marketing is a very nebulous concept, and lawyers often have a tendency to, well, I know marketing. Now, I've been a lawyer since 1980, and marketing for lawyers has changed dramatically. In the past, it was through contacts you had, your contacts start to die out. Then we get into the advertising phase for lawyers when most states permitted lawyers to advertise. And now we get into the area of high specialization where there's so many of us so the question is how do you make the pitch? Historically, I think lawyers have said, well, because I'm me and I'm great. And people should hire me because I'm me and I'm great. Wasn't that the attitude you saw early on?
Oh, absolutely. The original approach that lawyers and other professional services firms took was what we would call self-oriented or firm-centric. They said if we put our credentials out there and if we put ourselves out there, then people will want to buy it. And there may have been a time when that was true, but it's absolutely not the case anymore. Buyers, people who make decisions about hiring professional providers, just view them all as just a bunch of equal pieces. And there's no way of really distinguishing yourself based on what you say about yourself. The way people are looking at firms now is from a very, call it a selfish viewpoint. I, I'm, I believe you're probably very capable of performing whatever task I might hire you to perform. But what do you know about me? Why are you right for me? How can you help? How can you help me anticipate and overcome issues? Marketing to be effective has to be client centric, prospect centric. It's not what you say about the firm in effect, it's what you say about the prospect that's going to make the difference. And not enough firms are coming to realize that that's going to be the difference in creating a strong relationship and differentiating yourself versus in just remaining part of that non-differentiated group of competent firms who offer really nothing special for a prospect.
The client wants to know what's in it for him or her. That's really what they want to know. What can you do for me and how are you going to do it? I remember talking to a group of lawyers, and one of them said, we did a mock interview. And he said, I got your back when he's doing the mock interview. I said, don't tell me you have my back. Show me how you're going to have my back. Tell me things you're going to do to make me feel that you have my back. And oftentimes, lawyers make these statements that really have no substance to them. It's just really rhetoric. So I think it's important for the lawyer to go in well research with this client, with this customer or potential customer.
I strongly agree. And that has a lot of ramifications to it, Rudy, which create a whole different consideration set for that lawyer trying to build business. If you're going to impress a client and show that you understand what really matters to them and show them how you can help them be successful or be effective, it means you got to spend time understanding that client, or at least understanding the sector or the category in which that client operates. The time you devote to that is it's not billable time, so it's not infinite. You're going to have to control that, but it also means that you're going to probably have to make some decisions around what to pursue and what not to pursue. And too many lawyers are pursuing opportunities that offer not enough in revenue, not enough in profit, and frankly, not even a high probability that they're even going to win it. So, one of the major themes of the book, and something I've been preaching for over 30 years, is to pitch less and win more. Have a shorter, more curated prospect list, spend more time understanding what they need, getting to know them, and being able to communicate effectively about that. And that will give you a higher winning percentage among the opportunities you do choose to pursue. And those wins will probably come with higher profit margins and higher fees and more opportunity for long-term relationships with them. You can't have it always. You can't pitch everything, expect to win a lot of them. You have to make some decisions, and those decisions can actually, as difficult as they might be, will lead to much better financial and personal outcomes.
Well, in your book, you have this ingenious, it's so simple, it's ingenious, right? And that is the ROI per pitch. So
Hmm.
you're not talking about firm profits. You're not talking about the profits of a particular case. You're talking about of all the proposals that you make, how much revenue did you generate? And if you take all the failed proposals, right, the amount goes down. And the more failed proposals have, the more down the amount goes, which means that you're wasting a lot of time, basically.
Oh, for
So
sure.
if you focus more targeted, then your revenue is going to go up. Can you explain how you got to that? And when you use it to explain it to somebody, how do you explain it? How would you explain it to somebody you're consulting?
Well, in the best case scenario, a firm or even an individual lawyer should be able to know how many hours they spent in business development activities. Now, that includes attending conferences, doing networking, going to initial meetings, sending out marketing materials, sending out emails, and then eventually participating in writing a proposal, participating in a pitch, and so on. They should know how many hours that took. And of course, they know what the value of those hours are, whether you consider them to be your billable hours or whether your firm has some cost plus structure attached. But you can get a number for that. So take that total number that you spent on all your pursuits and then look at how much revenue you generated out of all your pursuits. When we did that exercise with a number of different firms and a number of different sectors, most of them had negative ROI. They spent more hours and more cost than they actually realized revenue. And if you took that,
Even though they're making money still, they may still be making money, but their ROI on the pitches is very low.
yeah, I mean, you could have earned $300,000 worth of revenue, but you invested $600,000 worth of time to get that $300,000 worth of revenue. When you look at it that way, it no, doesn't look so smart anymore. Um, if you don't have the actual numbers of hours spent, you can at least replicate or get an indication of what you're doing by just looking at how many you did. Did I have to do 20 pitches in order to win five new pieces of business? Um, that's a lousy percentage. You know, that barely gets you through to major leagues. I mean, and that's actually a good percentage that relative to what a lot of firms realize they're generating. In a better environment, what you're doing, Rudy, is you're spending, I don't know, instead of $600,000 to get $300,000 of revenue, you're spending $250,000 and you're getting $400,000 of revenue. We've seen numerous examples of that. Or you're, put more simply, you're pursuing 10 pieces of business and you're winning five of them instead of pursuing 20 pieces of business and winning five of them. In fact, out of those 10, you might win six or seven if you were smart about how you did your pursuits. So if you took the time to measure your investment into business development, you're gonna see some numbers that are going to be eye-opening for you and point you perhaps in a new direction.
But once you and knowing what business to get is also important because you have to know that once you get it, it's going to be profitable. A conversation I've had with many of my friends who are outside counsel is the client that says, your rate is going to be this, take it or leave it. But we promise you volume. Then you send the bill. And then they say, well, even at this reduced rate, we're going to cut your bill. And that client, in my mind, is not worth having. So this client wants you to charge $100 an hour when there's a client that's willing to pay you $300. So I'd rather spend my time working on the client that pays me $300 and be happier than somebody I know I got to fight with every billing cycle.
Sure. And we talked to a few firms that try to buy the business. So they know they want $300 an hour, but to get their foot in the door, you know, the old foot in the door strategy, they'll start
Loss
out at
leader.
yeah, they'll start out at $100 an hour, $150 an hour on the first project. And they'll tell the client that, you know, we're giving you a break because we want to develop a relationship. The question then becomes how many of those clients who start at the lower rate actually agree to a higher rate later on? More than
They'll go
likely,
somewhere else. They will go somewhere else.
of course, you've
And
trained them, you've taught them that they can get good legal services for $150 an hour. So why should they now pay you 200 or 250 or 300 an hour? That strategy is never a good long-term strategy. It gives you a little quick boost in revenue that you might otherwise have, but eventually either you're going to have to fire that client or you're going to have to live with much lower billing rates than you'd like.
I would take a different twist on it, Bob. I would say that when there's something really good and big that comes, they're not going to give it to you because they're going to think of you as a $100 lawyer.
Yeah.
Well, this other guy who's charging 700, he must be good. So I think there has to be a bit of some arrogance there on the part of the lawyers. So this is what I am worth, and I think you need to hold firm on that. And
Yes.
if it's a client that at the first meeting constantly wants to beat you up, beat you up, beat you up, then say, "Thank you, I can't help you."
You're bringing up a really important and subtle point, but it matters a great deal. And that is the first project that you get from a new client is setting the tone for what your value proposition is, what your worth is, and as well as what your expertise is moving
Mhm.
forward. We tell a story in the book, which is a true story, about an architect. This was an architectural design firm that really specializes in massive building projects. I mean, they put up stadiums and they put up bridges and they build, I mean, they just build multi million dollar projects. There was one they had their eye on for a new building for a law enforcement organization. And they were not getting a lot of love around being a candidate for that new building. But the client said to them, you know, if you want, we do need our bathrooms redesigned in the current building. If you want to take that project on, so we can see how you work and get some exposure to you, that one we'll give you. And then we'll see what happens later on with the new construction. Well, they took on the bathroom project. They did a good job with it, and they became known henceforth and forevermore within that client organization
The
as the
bathroom
bathroom
architect.
people, the bathroom architects. In
Yeah.
fact, the head of the architectural firm, that practice area, eventually was given by his colleagues in jest a golden toilet seat that he put up in his office, as a reminder of being the bathroom guy. So they did a great job, but they were labeled the bathroom people, and they never got a chance to bid on the major building. Now that's an extreme example. It's kind of mean on the part of the client, but that's the risk you're taking, and it's not that unusual.
But that happens to lawyers too because I've seen it.
Mhm.
I've seen people say, "I'm going to hire the most expensive firm because they're going to provide better legal services because they're more expensive." Now that turns out to be not true most of the time. Most of the great service you're going to get, not necessarily from the big firms, although they do have good lawyers, but you also have bad lawyers in big firms. And in my situation, some of my best lawyers have been solo practitioners. One person who's been out of the practice for 25 years and getting back in is probably smarter than most lawyers I have. And, medium-sized firms that I know are going to deliver the service and not think of overhead. So, you get the one extreme. You get the bathroom lawyer, and then you got the people that charge $2,500 an hour.
Yeah.
So what are they going to bid on? The $2,500 an hour lawyer is going to bid on bet the farm cases
Mhm.
where people, are desperate and they're not going to care about price. Right. But to that middle tier where you're competing with everyone else, that's where I think being strategic is important.
I agree. It's that middle tier that's also the most competitive. What we're
Exactly.
what we're seeing in a lot of different sectors is that smaller firms are trying to punch above their weight by trying to get into bigger clients, and the larger firms are now looking more and more at the smaller, what they would consider to be a smaller client, because they believe they have the growth opportunities associated with it. So that middle ground is a difficult place to play in, but you can be very effective in that middle section by being really strategic, as you said, being really thoughtful about who you pursue, why you're pursuing them, and how you're pursuing them, and being, as we started out by saying, being very client centric, focusing on what the client wants and not just what you want to say about yourself.
Well, you also talk about the truth about decision makers in chapter 4 of your book.
Mhm.
Can you enlighten our audiences what is the truth about decision makers?
Well, your audience won't be surprised to hear this, but decision makers are not rational human beings. Uh,
No,
they are
I am
human.
so shocked. I am so shocked by
Yeah,
that.
they're human beings. We've done extensive research on this, my colleagues and I, over the years. And what it comes down to is this: what let's call it the rational argument, which law firms put forward. Now, that includes their experience, their client list, their capabilities, their geographical location, the number of lawyers they have, um, all the things that might appear on a website or might be communicated in marketing materials. That matters to decision makers. But depending on the year in which we've conducted the research, the most recent research suggests that it's less than 30% of a decision. I think the number
Mhm.
we have is 28%. So 72% of a decision is based on these non-rational, non-technical issues. Now, those are things like, does the firm understand what I really need, where I'm really coming from, what I'm bothered by, how my business affects me personally, what I'm looking to achieve, what I'm looking to avoid. Another piece of that is we call chemistry. Do we like each other? Not just as friends, as drinking buddies, but do we share the same values? Do we share the same concerns? Do we communicate on the same level with each other? And the last of the four parts is we call it politics. Now, that could be macro politics. Are you Republican or Democrat? But it's more likely to be micro politics. What'll it say to my stakeholders, to the owner of my company, if I hire you? Rudy, remember when they used to say, nobody ever got fired hiring IBM? That attitude still exists. It's a very political attitude. So people care about how will I look to others if I'm based on the decision that I make. So these four areas, the rational, the technical, the price, the expertise is 25 to 30% of a decision. A law firm to be strategic and to be in control of the process has to learn what else the decision makers care about and be prepared to address that during the entire pursuit of the opportunity.
If I were, adding to what you're saying, and that is to me the most important is, do I feel like I can trust you?
Mhm.
Do I feel like I can trust you? Or are you just telling me things I want to hear? In some jurisdictions, lawyers are notorious for just telling you they're going to win. That it's a it's a slam dunk, things like that. But can I trust you to always tell me the truth? That's the first thing. And the second thing is, well, can I work with you? Is it going to be easy to work with you? That's to me, that's the second. Those are the two most important things. Now, to your comment about nobody ever got fired hiring IBM, they say that about the big firms. I remember being a young lawyer, I was pursuing a local St. Louis company, and I wasn't asking for their big stuff. I said, I'm starting out. I can take the smaller things that you might have. I can do them well and much cheaper. I said, son, if we don't hire big firms, that's a lack of status for us. So companies would brag about, oh, you spent $1 million with the lawyer. No, I spent 2 million. That playground doesn't exist anymore. And even the big companies are being competitive with pricing, right? So you have to figure out what's the fine line between what you're going to charge. So I think it becomes more important. Can I trust you? Because
Absolutely.
my options.
Absolutely. What we see today is that politics manifests in other ways besides this idea of hiring a big firm. It manifests in things like the power of incumbency. How will it look to me if I have a firm that's I've been working with before and now I don't work with them again? I hire somebody else. Or how will it look if I'm an Ohio-based firm, but I hire a firm from Texas? How will it look if I've been working with 50 lawyer firms or 40 lawyer firms, and now I hire a firm of only 10 lawyers. Now, I'm not suggesting any of these are the right or wrong decision. All I'm saying is that in the mind of the decision maker, there's some concern, or there might be some concern about how that will appear to others, and what reflection would that create about the decision maker themselves. So when we start talking about politics, we're talking about understanding whether any of that is operational. And if you do realize that that version of it might be playing a role in the decision, how do you address it or neutralize it during the course of the pursuit?
And but feel free to ask it. Feel
Yes.
free if you're the outside lawyer, you feel free to ask the potential customer, the potential client, tell me what's important about this case for you beyond just the legal part of it. The legal part we understand. This is what we do. But is there anything I need to know as to why this is important, or if it may not be important? Okay. It may be a low monetary amount, but it could have serious reputational consequences for a company. So I think it's very appropriate, and it shows that you're interested when you say, tell me what keeps you up at night, tell me what's important for you on this case, and tell me what you need me to do to make your life easier.
It's really frustrating for us. Rudy, I know you feel the same way when lawyers who are trained in how to ask questions, whether they're doing it in depositions, whether they're litigators. I mean, they learn how to interrogate or just extract information from a plaintiff or a defendant or somebody or a witness in a case. Yet they do not apply those same skills in business development. So many questions that could be answered are never asked. And that makes a huge difference in the likelihood of a law firm being able to acquire a new client or not.
But that, yes, I agree with you, but they don't make the connection.
Yeah.
One of the things I learned from my old law partner, who was a politician, he was Attorney General in the state of Missouri. He said to me, and it stuck with me all these years, is the key to being a great lawyer is taking something complicated and making it simple.
Hmm.
Your client and a jury, they're not lawyers. Now, if you're working with inside counsel, you're probably working with a lawyer, but the process is still the same. Make the story simple. People like stories. I've often said, if you're Catholic and you learn the Ten Commandments, let me see which one of them am I missing something. But if you're talking about the story of David and Goliath, everyone can tell that story. So think of the story you're going to tell, to describe your services, to describe what you can do, because that's what puts a person at ease.
Storytelling is you can Google or chat GPT the value of storytelling in business, and you'll hear plenty. You'll get plenty of information on it. Yet it's so underutilized, whether it's by lawyers or almost any professional. People don't remember facts and statistics.
They
They
remember
remember
the story.
they remember stories. Now, what lawyers struggle with, and this is very understandable, because lawyers are very rational, very analytical people by nature, but they struggle with storytelling because it sounds too fuzzy. It sounds like you have to be George Lucas, or Richard Osman or someone to be able to write a story. The reality is that stories have structure. They have identifiable parts to them. And you can be very analytical and very linear in your thought process and be able to create a wonderful story by knowing what the parts are. Now, just to give you a quick idea of it, every story has a problem to be solved.
Exactly.
Every engagement that a lawyer has had is based on the need to solve a problem. So the place to start creating stories is around identifying what's the problem that we are going to solve or that we did solve or that we were hired to solve. Start with the problem. Now, sometimes it's a problem negative, it's a case. You're the
Mhm.
defendant in a case or or there's a clear downside to it. But sometimes it's an upside. Sometimes it's an M&A deal or a real estate deal and the opportunity to help a client do better than they otherwise would do by having better legal advice. But that's too is the beginning of a story. That we call that the opportunity. So you have the challenge or problem, then you have the
Mhm.
or the opportunity. From there, you can go talking about the process that we engage in that allows us to address the problem or create
Mhm.
the opportunity's solution. And then here's an example of one where we did exactly that. It's a very simple storytelling structure. Um, and it's way more compelling than showing the number of cases we handled in the last year. These are the clients that we work with the last year. These are the amount of money we recovered in the last year. It's not that it's unimportant, it's that everybody's got that. A client's going to hear that over and over again. But the story that you tell is the thing that separates you from the pack and makes you memorable.
Oh, exactly. And I'm a big believer in storytelling. I did a presentation for the Association of Corporate Counsel during the pandemic, and it was called Jazz Drumming and the Art of Persuasion. We had a drummer, we had an opera singer, and of course, I was the only one there with zero musical talent. But something very profound, well, many profound things came out of that session, but one of them has to do with the story. If I say to you a box of movie theater popcorn has 35 grams of saturated fat, that doesn't mean anything. But if I say to you it has more saturated fat than a bacon and egg breakfast, McDonald's Happy Meal, and a steak and egg dinner, then that resonates. So these stories have to resonate. The second part is those stories have to be sincere. And one other word I'd like to add to this is humility. You got to have something. Nobody likes arrogant people. I mean, there are some people that I guess they've built a reputation on being arrogant, and maybe that attracts a certain bit of a client. But I find that most of my colleagues, they don't like arrogant people. I remember interviewing a lawyer in Mexico City, and the conversation was, well, we just don't represent everybody. We're very particular about who we represent. Really?
Mhm.
Okay. Well, nice talking to you. And that's, the arrogance here. So I think there has to be some humility in
Yeah,
presentation.
you mentioned it earlier. You talked about honesty. You can talk about transparency. Similarly, there's a word that David Maister and Charlie Green use in their book, The Trusted Advisor, which next to my book is a great one to have on your shelf.
Of course, it's second year book. Okay, let's just
Second,
be clear. It's second year book.
it's a
Your
close
book is
second.
very good. No, your
Well,
book is very.
thank you for that. But to go back to Maister and Green, they use an interesting word to reflect what you're talking about, Rudy. The lack, which in this case is not being arrogant or hubristic. They use the word intimacy. They say that trust requires intimacy, meaning you're willing to say to somebody, here's what we can do and here's what we cannot do. These are our strengths and these are areas that we're not as strong with. Here's where we made a mistake and here's what we learned from it. Or if a relationship is this begins and now it's continually tested by that level of trust. In other words, there's a high expectation for a level of trust. It
Mhm.
can quickly be eroded if the client perceives a lack of transparency and honesty, or as it says, intimacy. So all of that matters, and that removes the aura or any perception of hubris or arrogance and replaces it with a greater form of relationship, chemistry, trust, all the things that ladder up to a successful long-term client relationship.
But that means, Bob, that you have to continuously market with your client. I always tell people, I tell outside counsel quite a bit. I said, you don't have a client locked in forever. You always have to continually make the pitch to your client. So you've got the first pitch, which is getting the business. The next pitch is doing the work and communication. Again, telling the story all along the way. Client doesn't want to know the intimate details of the legal technicalities. He wants to know, we took depositions, they went very well. These are some major points. If you want more details, I'll let you have them. Okay. And here, by the way, just in case you wanna read the documents, they're not brief. And because they think that the client is certain, they don't necessarily return calls. Well, I'm busy. I've already got this client. So, that's a mistake I see a lot of law firms make, from very small firms to very big firms.
Yeah, you can take that to a saying that we have, which is that your best client is somebody else's best prospect. And
Exactly.
when you're not with them, someone else is selling to them. Someone else is trying to get a meeting with them. Someone else is trying to impress them with their credentials. Someone else is trying to leverage a network connection, perhaps. So never take your relationships for granted. Now, some of your clients have hired you for a matter. They may or may not see you as being capable of handling different matters or having other specialties, and they could be accurate about that. But if you're thinking that I can just wait for the phone to ring because they'll definitely call me the next time a similar matter occurs, you're running a huge risk of losing that client completely. What's important in keeping clients long term is showing a continual duty of care for them, a continual respect for where they're coming from, an interest in them. And I don't simply mean remembering when their kids' birthdays are, although that's not unimportant, but it's showing an interest in their business, showing an interest in things that you might not ever be able to address as their lawyer, but that matter to them. And the fact that you are interested in hearing about it or talking about it shows that client that you are a valuable, and let's use the word, trusted resource, and makes it more likely that they will call you the next time there's a matter that you should be handling.
But you have to foster that trust continuously.
Yes,
And
yes.
and if you're right, somebody's always pitching your client. But if you've got that trusted relationship, I don't care how many pitches people are going to make. The client is not going to switch unless somebody above says you're switching, right? Or unless you do something to mess things up. Okay. He's not going to go because inside counsel wants somebody who's going to have their back, but you still have to foster the relationship. It's like telling your girlfriend, hey, I love you, and you don't see her for 3 weeks. That type of
There's a
thing.
very, yeah, yep. There's something, a very valuable exercise that many of the lawyers viewing this should consider doing. And that is look at your current client roster, especially your most valuable clients, and ask yourselves if they were not a client, but I wanted them to be, what would I do? How would I approach them? What messaging would I give them? What would I do to show my interest in them? And you'll realize that some of your current relationships, hopefully not many, but some of them are more vulnerable than you think they are.
Exactly.
Those are the ones that you should have an active plan to elevate the level of trust, to elevate the value proposition that you have. We call it your position in the value chain, rather than be seen at what might be a lower position, which is you're a vendor, you're a provider for a certain problem. You should look to elevate your position in that value chain as somebody who is, what we used to say in the old days, Rudy, is on the speed dial. Somebody
Exactly.
who they're going to call no matter what. Even if you can't solve it for them, they just want to discuss it with you. That those leaps are possible, but only when you start with the intention of discovering what it is.
There's a funny episode on Seinfeld where people were battling to be on the speed dial. Well, I'm number one. Now I'm down to number two. But when you talk about the sales pitch to the client initially, once you have the client, you have to still continually make the sales pitch. Because
Exactly.
something that happens often is, gee, I didn't know you did that work. So you should always
Exactly.
keep your client always updated on what you do, what you're doing. I remember a lawyer from the Netherlands asked me, "Well, I want your advice on something. I haven't talked to my client for 6 months, and I handled a matter for him. It went well, but I feel if I call him that I'm just begging." I said, "No, you have a relationship with him. You did a good job. It's perfectly okay to say, 'How are you doing?' Hey, I remember our case. I had a great time representing you. If you feel like going to lunch, let me know. But I just want you to know I enjoyed my time with you as my client." Right?
Yep.
That's a sales pitch without being a sales pitch. It shows sincerity, shows humility. Not, how come you haven't sent me anything?
It's a great example, and it's very accessible to any lawyer who's viewing this conversation. The opportunity to, and now let me just step back for a moment and say, you might not be able to do this with every single one of your clients, but
Exactly. You don't have the time.
where you have a valuable client, and you can define value how you want to. We can talk about that also. But where you
Mhm.
have a valuable client, not only should you, but you must have a continual presence with them. We set up for our clients a monthly schedule. We ask them to be in touch with their client, with their valuable client, at least once a month and make it something of value that you're providing. Now, it could be at least, hey, how you doing? Or it could be, I saw this article and thought of you. Or it could be, here's some thought leadership that we just posted on LinkedIn. I want to make sure that you see it. But when they realize that you're thinking about them and you're looking out for their well-being, you are strengthening the relationship and creating greater protection against the incursion potential of a competitor stepping in.
Well, it's low hanging fruit. How's your
Hmm.
grandchild? Oh, I understand your daughter had a child. Congratulations. Or God, your son was 5 or 10 when I met him, and now he must be in college. People always want to talk about themselves, and when you ask them about themselves, they'll talk. Which is why, there's an expression that says God gave you one mouth and two ears. Use your ears more than your mouth, and listen more. We have a comment, Bob. It says, I don't want to simplify in any way what Bob is explaining, but basically the point from which it all starts is knowing how to communicate assertively. And I would add, instead of assertively, because I think what this person means is with confidence, with conviction.
I second and third everything that you just said and that Marcella said very strongly. Another word I would add to it, which we've been talking about, Rudy, is communicate proactively. Don't wait for there to be a reason to communicate. Create it as long as it is client centric, as long as it's obvious to the client that you're doing it because you're thinking of their benefit. You're not doing it because you want to sell another service to them. As soon as you cross the line from here's something for your benefit to I want to sell you something, you've now changed the relationship immensely. It's now become transactional, and you've opened yourself up to all kinds of competitive inroads.
Exactly.
So all of those
Exactly.
things work together. Thank you for the comment, Marcella.
I have he's deceased now, but I had a brother-in-law who was in the music business. And he used to say, when I give him advice, he used to say, oh, that's not how it works in my business. No, you don't understand. My business doesn't work like that. I said, Lenny, so the rules of business don't apply in your business at all. Yours is the only business where the rules don't apply. And I think sometimes lawyers believe that. Oh, no, I can't treat this. I'm a lawyer. I practice law. But it needs to be treated like a business. And an interesting comment made by Tamara, when she was asking you, how can you be effective working in so many industries? You did work for ACOM, BAE Systems, KPMG, Moody Analytics, all these companies. The fact is, the principles are all the same. So the same thing that a salesperson at IBM does or a salesperson at Microsoft does, the same thing a lawyer should be doing when, treating it like a business.
Exactly. And I would take that to drive the point home, Rudy. I would take it a step further and say that the reason the principles apply across all these different industries is because, and this is where we started, you're selling to human beings. It's a person there. Now, their role might be GC, their role might be business owner, their role might be COO, their role might be you name it, but they're still a human being. And the research is profound and consistent that human beings make high stakes decisions in a predictable manner. In fact, there's a great book that's called Predictably Irrational, which suggests that people make the most important decisions irrationally. And that's what we want lawyers to be aware of, is to be sensitive to the fact that you're selling to a human being. You're not selling to a title. You're not selling to a university degree. You're selling to a person who thinks like a person and is thinking about you as a person, not as a title and not as a degree. And that actually should make things easier for you because it opens the door for you to be more effective.
I agree. Bob, something that I got a big kick out of was chapter 8, presenting for a standing ovation. Can you, Bob, nice of you to join us. Always a charmer, that Elliot. I mean, explain to our my audience, both here and on LinkedIn, what's the essence of that chapter.
Well, there's a lot to go through in that chapter, and I'm not trying to sound like I'm trying to sell books, but I want to kind of give you a piece of it because this may be the most important piece for anybody listening
Mm-hmm.
to this. If you want to get a standing ovation in a presentation, which should be your goal, by the way,
Mm-hmm.
it's not in order to win the business, you have to be impressive.
Exactly.
To do that requires a host of things, good preparation, good rehearsal, good timing, and so on. But it also requires, and I think this is what I mean when I say the most important bit, you win or lose a pitch, you win or lose a presentation in the first 10 minutes. 10 minutes.
That
In,
long, I would say the first couple of minutes.
well, I'm giving our your decision makers the benefit of the doubt. They're about
Okay.
to invest what for them is a lot of money in a decision. And while people do make judgments, the psychological research is very clear on this. They make some judgments almost instantaneously. It's not it's pretty common that people will give you 10 minutes, 8 to 10 minutes to state your case. Now, what happens in most pitches, if your audience thinks about their experiences, the first 10 minutes is wow, we introduce ourselves, we review our credentials, we go over our experience, we talk about our client lists. If there's been a specific matter, we review our understanding of the matter. These are not unimportant points, but they're the same things that everybody's saying. All you're doing is you're establishing the fact that there was a reason we were invited. But at the end of the 10 minutes, what does the decision maker actually know or feel about you as a firm that's going to tip the scales in your favor? What we want to see all firms do in the first 10 minutes is give them something that proves to them or gives them reason to believe that you're going to be different, that you're going to have a unique understanding of what's required and where this has to go, that you've done your homework and more. You've gone beyond what was initially asked for. and really showing that you care about this opportunity. There's a host of things you can and should do in those first 10 minutes that creates in the room, whether it's one decision maker or five decision makers, you turn them into what we call bobblehead dolls. They're listening to you talk and they're
Oh, I
going,
get it.
yep,
Yeah.
yep, yep, that's it. That's who we are. That's what we need. That's what our business is. That's the kind of issue we're facing. Yep, that's the kind of outcome we want. Not parroting back to them what they could have read on your website or what you wrote or what they wrote to you in their RFP or their statement of need, whatever they call it. So you want to get a standing ovation, you got to start by winning in the first 10 minutes. Then you close the sale in what you do in the next 40 minutes or 20 minutes, depending on how long the meeting is. And certainly the book will go into more details on that.
And I would recommend that everyone purchase Bob's book. It's on Kindle. You can get Kindle, you know, if you're Kindle Unlimited, you get the book anyway, but definitely get it. If you like hardcover, oh, I said, Bob, I just ordered your book on Amazon. This conversation has made me very interested in reading your book. So,
Well, thank you. And Marcella, after you read it, however long it takes, let me know what you think of it. Yeah, it's available. There's a Kindle edition, there's a paperback edition, and there's also an audiobook
good.
available of it as well.
We're almost to the end of the time, but what I wanted to close with this is lawyers get a lot of training on being a lawyer. They get very little training on how to do presentations. And that's something that they should be trained on. So, for example, something that's relatively easy and inexpensive is Toastmasters. People think just because they talk, they know how to communicate. And too often, lawyers don't know how to communicate to get past that 10 minutes. That's one thing to have, the subject matter and the area and you can make it interesting, but the manner in which you communicate is just as important, if not more so. And so I think training on that is also just as important as knowing the subject matter.
Yeah, what's interesting about that, Rudy, and I agree completely, is that lawyers are usually relatively good at presenting to having conversations with people they know, their current clients. That's a great example of that. When you put them into a situation with a prospect who they've not met before or haven't had much to do with before, it actually has different requirements. The rules are different. The
Mm-hmm.
expectations are different. And frankly, you can mess it up, you can flub your words, you can talk too long or not long enough with a current client, and they're okay with that. They know you. They know your style, they know your approach. You do that with a prospect and you're done because your lack of facility, your lack of communication comfort and skills is going to contrast in a bad way potentially with those of the competition that they're also talking to or those of their current firm if it's just a matter of you versus the incumbent. So yeah, take Toastmasters. We do training in communication and presentation. Talk to us. Get a coach, which we don't do, but get a personal coach to help you with it. But understand that the how you communicate can be even more
I
important than the
believe
what
it's,
you communicate.
I
And
really believe routinely that's more important.
Yeah, I mean, there's tons of research on that too.
Yeah.
You got to master, you got to have control, deliberate intention around the how, not just the what, particularly in these competitive business development situations.
I think that, by the way, we have somebody else who's bought your book too, Dulcura. This is an excellent talk. I'm going to get that book right away. So at least we sold two books on this thing, right?
Oh, yeah,
I'm
it's
sure you'll
in,
you'll 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 sell more. I think, in closing, you always need to evaluate your pitch, your presentation, and you need to tailor it to the client, the potential client. When I remember, and what that means is that you have to know your market. You have to understand your market. When I was in private practice, I was a solo practitioner. I did international adoptions. And one of the things I learned is that adoption families, you market to them differently than you did, regular legal. They want to read material. They'll read material from four or five people and then make a decision. But I used to get people who would haggle with me on fees. And somebody would say, well, your fees are say $2,000 more than say some mom and pop type adoption agency. And they said, well, if you reduce it, we'll go with it. I'm not reducing my fee. This is what I charge. It's a fair fee. And by the way, if something goes wrong with that mom and pop agency, they're going to hire somebody like me. With me, I handle no matter what I need to handle for my client until the case gets done. And, people push back. Some people went away. But then again, you don't want those people. You want the people who are going to hire you for what they think you can do. If they start haggling too much about the money, they're never going to appreciate what you do.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Exactly. Establish the value of what you're doing, um, and justify your price on the basis of the fact that you have, and we'll go back to original conversation. 28% is is the rational part. It's the solution. It's the price. It's the expertise and so on, and the pricing. 72% is not rational. It's chemistry and understanding and politics and whatnot. If you're trying to justify your price based on 28% of a decision, then you'll always have pricing pressures. They'll always try to lower you. If you establish your relationship based on that 72%, based on the fact that we understand you and what you need and what you're facing and what your challenges are. We share the same values. We communicate well with each other. We will be likable, if not friends, and that we are a politically smart choice. We will make you look good. We will help you get through your career or help you with an issue that's above your pay grade. If you win on those three areas, your price is no longer that big an issue for them. That's what you were saying, in effect, with your adoption cases that you discussed. And that's what any lawyer can do in any area of any practice area. Establish your value, you can justify your price.
When I was a baby lawyer, and I'm talking about presenting my first cases in court, and I remember, and I hope he's still alive, Judge Tony Everwine said to me, Rudy, I would rather be sitting in my office doing nothing than not getting paid enough.
Mhm.
Those are wise words to live by.
No question.
So we are at the end, and Bob, what I generally do is I'm going to thank my LinkedIn audience for attending the webinar. I think it's just been incredible. So thank you so much. To my Zoom audience, this is a time in which I